Hi, Isaac. So good to connect with you again today.
Hi, how are you doing, Elena?
I'm very well, all the better for connecting. Um, I know that you have been in the field of spirituality for a very long time, um, but especially recently, you have redoubled your efforts in researching ways to keep well, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, in every way, really. And I'm delighted that you're here to share with us today some of these wonderful tools that you have been researching and implementing yourself, and I believe also recommending to those that you mentor.
Yeah.
Now, you speak of the four foundational pillars for optimum health. Um, Please explain. What are they?
Okay. They're basically, I would consider them four comprehensive areas. Bioelectric harmony, which includes the Chinese version, what we call the life force energy, qi. Wilhelm Reich, the researcher into orgasm and orgone energy, called it orgone, like organic energy. Earthing is a recent understanding of how the bioelectricity of the body is matched with the bioelectric magnetic field of the planet. And in turn, the bioelectric magnetic field of the planet is dancing with the sun's bioelectromagnetic field or electromagnetic fields, and also in subtle relationships with things like gamma radiation, deep space X-ray radiation, the subtle magnetic fields that are being exerted on us all the time from the other planets in our solar system, from even deep space quasars and pulsars. I mean, these are subtle streams, but anybody who's taken the time to explore Chinese acupuncture from the 400 BC to 300, 200 BC understands that those meridians and those naviers and everything in the acupuncture chart relate to electrical transmission lines within the human body. And we have polarities in the body. So when I start with the first topic here, which is bioelectric fields, that is the starting point, not what you eat, not how your lifestyle is constructed necessarily, not how much meditation, silence, or breath work you do, not how many push-ups you can do, or how many squats, or how many planks you can do, but what is your understanding of how we live in a very connected universe, in a very connected um, environment that isn't us in isolation with the environment. It's seeing the environment as ourselves, our bodies as the environment. And so we have to understand that, or come into a new understanding and stop blinkering ourselves that our processes in the body are completely down to chemical reactions and actions. They are the byproduct of electrical information that is coming from firing from the brain. The heart is a huge electric organ, if you will. It fires based on an electrical neuron charge, and the electronic or electromagnetic field of the heart can actually be picked up or detected by instruments up to 12 feet away from the body. But the only way you can read a brainwave is to put an electrode on bare skin on the scalp. So there are powerful electromagnetic forces in nature that we are automatically attuned to, but we have interfered with that balance over the last 140 to 175 years, and we no longer know at a conscious level what it feels like to be in an environment that doesn't have these environmental toxins, these chemicals in the exterior world, cleaning products, hair products, all the rest of it, the artificial elements and chemicals in the food chain. We don't know what that's like. So our great 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 grandparents did. They lived in an environment that was completely devoid of all these things. They're putting pressure on our biology, and pressure especially on our central nervous system, which is entirely governed by electricity. So I'd start with the bioelectric always.
Okay, so what can we do about that? I guess having some degree of awareness helps. But
Mm-hmm.
what practical steps can we take?
The practical steps at this moment in time are all preventative rather than proactive. To me, proactive means I'm going to go find some place on the planet where there are no Wi-Fi towers, where there are no electric lines, essentially returning to the lifestyle of our foraging hunter-gatherer ancestors of about 50,000 years ago. Probably not a practical step for a lot of people. So I'm not going to recommend you try doing this without going through a very intense survival training course or knowing what you're
At the
doing
very least, right?
at the very least, and or going out and learning how to do permaculture farming or how to build your own house and put off-grid electric power sources on it, like solar power or geothermal heating or heat pumps and all that kind of stuff. But they still use electricity, so you're still enmeshed or involved in an electric field. If there's house wiring, you're in a field. Um, so sans that, I think the main thing is to investigate with an open mind, do your own research around uh, the propagation of non-ionizing and non-ionizing radiation that we find everywhere in our artificial environment this time. It's not just about Wi-Fi. It's also about the radiation off the screens of our computers and our devices. It's about what's in the house wiring. Is the house wiring actually going to an earth ground, a cold water pipe, or a spike into the earth, or is it not grounded? There are all kinds of considerations. You could probably get really paranoid about the things you'd have to fix in order to live as our ancestors did. So I don't recommend that because that creates more stress. And if there's anything I can say about stress, it is the worst thing in the world for your immune system. Um, so the things that we do, the things that I recommend now and have found to be useful and practical and work on my person is a high density carbon material from the Karelian region of Russia called Shungite, and is the densest carbon material on the planet. So I wear this little pendant right over my heart. I can fish it out and show it to people. That essentially it doesn't destroy radiation. It just acts as a shield. It's a neutral organic shield, as opposed to a lot of these things that are developed in laboratories or by technicians. So instead of going with something that's high tech, developed in the same world that we're trying to prevent any intrusion from or prevent ill health from, go with organic every time. Simple is the solution to any complex problem. That's the one thing I've learned over the last quarter century. If you try to address a problem with more complexity, you're going to create more consequences every single time. So with the bioelectric field, it's really important to do the simplest things possible that have the most effectiveness.
It's a really interesting concept, going with something simple and organic rather than technological and complex. I have a piece of Shungite.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I keep it on my desk where my computer is.
cool.
Um, I honestly don't know that it does something like to what
Yeah,
extent or
you can't feel it. I know you
but I
can't
can
feel it.
feel something. I can feel
Yeah.
something. Whether it's the placebo effect or this thing actually working, I can feel a difference, I have to say.
I have seen demonstration videos of people using a wideband electromagnetic field meter, basically a radiation meter, and turning on a radiation source like a microwave oven and taking a reading with the EMF meter and then putting a sheet of raw, unprocessed shungite right between the meter and the microwave oven, and all of a sudden the reading goes down just about zero,
Wonderful.
0.00. So, I mean, these are not doctored videos, the ones that I've seen anyway. So the Shungite is one thing. This little device is called a power line. And a power line, as you can see, has a plug that works in the United Kingdom on one side and a little port in the bottom that runs one of these cables called an Ethernet cable, RJ14, from this to your laptop, your PC, or even your phone with a proper adapter. Now, where's the other one? This one sits down by your router, and another RJ14 cable goes from the back of your router into this. Okay, but the Wi-Fi is still on, right? You eliminate the Wi-Fi by contacting your internet service provider and asking for the access information to be able to go in on your computer or your smartphone and disable the Wi-Fi signal entirely, leaving only the broadband, but all hardwired because these work through the house wiring. anybody's house wiring. There are American ones, there are Australian ones, whatever plug type. You can buy an adapter for the plug. But this keeps the Wi-Fi signature completely not in your home work environment. It's completely gone. You're just running everything on fiber optic or house wiring broadband. And when that signature isn't there, you are starting to feel more and more of the Earth's electromagnetic benefits. For those who say, well, I can't go without Wi-Fi, well, turn it off at night before you go to sleep. Find out how to switch it off inside the router and before you go to sleep. That will improve your sleep, and you won't be bathed in that radiation field all night long. Keep your phones in somewhere else in the house and switch them off. Stop looking at a phone that doesn't have a blue light filter on it at night, or a computer, because it affects the melatonin in the hypothalamus. And if you don't have a good night's sleep, it compromises your immune system. So these are some simple steps for a bioelectric harmony within your work or home environment. Do not operate one of these when you're in a car. I know, well, what am I going to do for GPS? Well, if you're really needing that GPS, put a piece of Shungite on the back of it. Because basically a metal car, metal-bodied, metal-framed car turns into a Faraday cage. And if you want to look that up, it's Faraday. Faraday cages basically concentrate fields of electromagnetic force or repel them. You can be in a Faraday cage with no electric charge inside of it, and any of the artificial electromagnetic grids, including microwave radiation, radar, electrical transmission, none of it can get through that Faraday cage. But if you take one of these inside of a Faraday cage with you, you've turned the whole Faraday cage or your automobile into one giant Wi-Fi antenna or mobile data antenna.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a scary thought.
You're frying yourself, basically.
Goodness.
And use hands-free. Use a
True.
headset or hands-free when you're taking a call or making a call. Don't put it up against your head, please.
I'm just wondering, is it possible that we can evolve or mutate to be more resistant to these things since that they are so prevalent in cities at the moment?
They're everywhere because, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I've been looking for correlation and been finding supporting medical and scientific correlation evidence on the connection between the rollout of various electronic or electricity technologies in the last 145, 150 years, actually going back further, 175 years, and things like pandemics or the onset, sudden increase in certain diseases we've become comfortable with in this day and age, like heart disease, cancer, leukemia, Lou Gehrig's disease. I mean, any of these diseases. Um, what's that one? I just read about it this morning. That's a nervous system related disease. And there's a heck of a correlation to the rollout of various technologies since the invention of the telegraph. And everybody's been sort of in a tizzy right now about maybe there's a relationship between the switching on and rolling out of and switching on of 5G networks in various countries and coronavirus. It's gotten David Icke banned from YouTube and Facebook, and it's a controversial hot potato. But it is interesting to me that the research that is being done and has been done is finding correlation between these different epochs in the industrial age and the capitalist age and the onset of these digital technologies in 1992 and onward. Since that time, we've had 4 pandemics since the internet came into being, and they went up according to the introduction of various technologies. When the first iPhone came out, for example, or when we switched from 3G to 4G. When these generations that we call 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, they're just generations of technology related to the same thing, which is the propagation of microwave radiation for communications. So 5G is just another permutation with one main difference. 5G is a millimeter wave based technology, not a microwave based technology. And millimeter waves penetrate through the epidermal layer of the skin, whereas microwave, non-ionizing microwave radiation does not. So again, every one of these technologies, just like when cigarettes came out and the oil industry came into being and everybody was putting asbestos in the buildings, everybody said, oh, it's safe, it's fine. But there's never been any pre-testing done for any of these technologies. So we don't know what effects they have on the environment or on us. And so I ask people, keep an open mind, do your own research. But when you find correlations, connecting the dots, then you have to think, okay, well, maybe everything that we assume to be true is based on a false premise. And if that's so, we have to rethink things. So in terms of taking steps in order to modify or to reduce the effects, these are some of the steps that I've given here and now that can help to not eliminate, but to bring down the exposure level, bring down the effects or the potential effects that they would have on your health and on your well-being, and certainly on your state of mind, your frame of mind.
What about earthing or grounding?
Earthing is one thing that's come into vogue because of the discovery of the effects of what happens with our body's electromagnetic or bioelectric properties when we come in contact with nature. Okay, so when we take our shoes off and our socks off and we go for a walk on the wet sand at the beach, we feel so good afterwards. It's because of the negative ions of the water coming in and going out, the negative ion field that's generated. But it's also because you have put your feet, which have the highest number of neurological sensors on the soles of the feet, unless they're covered in Nikes, onto the bare, wet sand, which is highly conductive because of the salt water content. And you have put yourself back into harmonic resonance with the planet's electromagnetic field. It has actually been found that if you do that, you can stand on the grass, the lawn in your backyard and get the same effect. You can stand on bare concrete because it's all earth-made materials that are in concrete. And if there's bare earth under that and not a layer of visqueen or weed barrier, you're going to get the telluric effects of the earth's electromagnetic field coming right up through your feet and up through all of your organs and out the top of your head. Well, guess what? The human body is polarized. Your feet are the highest negative polarity points, your feet and your knees and your hips. The highest polarity points is the back of the heart and the back of the head and the back of the sacral area on the bottom of the spine, close to the bottom of the spine. But everything else is negative. So you have these positive and negative polarities: head, crown, sky; feet, negative polarity, earth. We are walking around completing a bioelectric circuit with the ionosphere and the Van Allen belt and the Earth's core. Every single living piece of biology on this planet does the same thing, including trees and
Fascinating.
plants.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
You can
So get your feet out in the dirt. Get your hands in the dirt, because hands in the dirt have an effect, a positive effect on the microbiome in your intestinal tract.
Yes, and there are devices for earthing or grounding.
Yes,
You've, yeah,
mats and stuff.
mats, sheets, blankets,
Exactly.
things to put where you have your computer or where you're sitting at your desk, all kinds of things.
Yep.
Okay, great. So that is one pillar, right?
Yep. That's the first pillar.
That's the first pillar. What's
Harmony
this?
with the environment and reducing toxic effects.
Okay, what's the second one?
The second one is nutrition and water. It's what you take into your body. Um, I have to say, to each his own. Everybody's chemistry is slightly different, just like everybody's electromagnetic sensitivity is slightly different. Some people are great conductors of electricity and great exuders of electricity. Others are like nothing. I mean, they can actually kill a circuit. If you hold hands with a bunch of other people and you put somebody into that circuit that's got a fever or has low conductivity, then it will stop the connection points between two people touching a Van de Graaff generator. These are experiments they did back in the late 18th century, early 19th century, and discovered if a human being is inserted in that chain of people that has a fever, Their polarity is reversed. It stops the circuit. There's no longer a tingling shock going around the circle of people holding hands. It gets stopped with that person. So um, it's important that you stay hydrated, but not overhydrated. Just taking a few sips of water is exponentially adding 10,000 times more electromagnetic transmission capability within the cells, the neurons, and a thing that I discovered just recently called myelin sheaths. Now, myelin sheaths are around the nerve cells, both in the brain and through the entire central nervous system, and they're superconductive direct current pathways for all the signaling in your body. And if the central nervous system and the brain are happy, then guess what? Everything that's connected to every tissue and organ in the body is also responding to that health. The one thing that is the governor with this is oxygen. And if you don't get enough oxygen, one from the food you're eating, the water you're drinking, and from the lungs, your brain is the first to suffer. And this, without the central nervous system and the brain, everything goes kaput, goes haywire. So nutrition and water, and I don't say one's more important than the other, they're equal. Um, Overhydrating can put a lot of pressure on the kidneys and bladder. I wouldn't recommend that. And here's the caveat for water. It has to be living water. It has to be water that you get out of a well or that you can filter and purify either through reverse osmosis or through these candle gravity filters or these under sink filters. I can't stress that enough because the municipal water supplies are loaded with chlorine and other chemicals. And so you're putting dead water into yourself, all right? It works to a point and it doesn't. So, reducing toxicity from that standpoint is important, but hydrating the cells, hydrating the neurons, hydrating the myelin sheaths, very, very important. The nutrition side of thing is pretty much, again, an individual thing because your chemistry and your preferences are different from the next person's. We prefer a vegan diet, predominantly vegan or highly vegetarian, for a lot of different reasons. But number one, we feel better and our immune systems are happy with it. Try to stay away from processed foods. Deep fried foods doesn't mean you can't have an occasional basket of French fries or anything like that, or chips, as they say in the UK. It's the habituated reliance on them that's difficult because of the lack of nutrition in them. Green leafy vegetables, fresh fruits, steamed. If you want warm, if you're living in a climate like what I'm living in, you have to warm things in the wintertime, either steaming, roasting, sauteing, stir frying. Those kind of things will help you in cold, wet, damp climates to get enough greens, get enough chlorophyll, to get enough vegetables. And you get a lot of your minerals and trace elements from those things. We use supplements, and I'm not ashamed to say so. We also use vitamin C, hopefully timed release, high quality, vitamin D3, by the way, which your body naturally produces in the summertime. So if you're in a sunnier environment, don't take D3. Stand outside with your sleeves rolled up. Go for walks with your sleeves rolled up. When the skin of the forearm and the upper arm are exposed to the sun, it is your vitamin D3 factory. Again, great immune system support. Zinc in very moderate quantities, maybe 2-3 times a week, no more than 20 milligrams for a week's time. Probiotics, prebiotic probiotics for gut health. And last but not least, magnesium, either in the form of Epsom salt baths or taken internally in moderation, especially with calcium, because these things are the building blocks of the handling stress, the central nervous system being able to handle stress, because we lose calcium quick, we lose magnesium quick, and we lose vitamin C quick. Well, you cannot metabolize calcium without vitamin C. You cannot metabolize vitamin D3 without vitamin C. So all of these things work interactively. But if you're eating healthy enough, you shouldn't even need all these supplements. One of the ones that we use that has a wide variety, a wide spectrum, herbs and other trace minerals or trace elements in it is Terra Nova. I'm going to drop a name, Terra Nova Living Micronutrients. So that's kind of the baseline that we use, and everything else is added on. But we don't take the same things every day, and we don't take it every day. We don't take vitamin D3 every day. We might substitute a little capsule of oregano oil, for example, or turmeric. So you can get raw turmeric, organic turmeric, add a little bit to your food. If you're really clever, get a capsule maker, use vegetarian capsules, make your own vegetarian turmeric capsules. They're especially great if you start coming down with something. You know, if you can't get echinacea, try turmeric. It is the goddess of healing in India. So there you
Yeah,
go.
yeah. I had another guest the other day who gave a very useful little tip about eating rainbow-colored vegetables and fruits.
Right.
Getting all the different colors ensures that we get a variety of the vitamins and minerals that we need without having to be experts in the nutritional content of each specific food. Um, and then again, I think it's good to do one's research and also maybe find some good practitioner. I
Yeah.
do like the Taoist approaches with looking at the elemental constitution in the body and then working with the elements and the seasons and so on to choose foods to eat that will support one's health. And
That's
you
very important.
mentioned, sorry, and you mentioned Ayurveda as well. I think that's
Yeah.
also quite a great science, where we can understand our type a little bit better. We can understand when we're out of balance and what would bring us to balance in a more natural way, perhaps.
Yeah, that's perfect. As Edgar Casey, the Edgar Casey readings, especially the health readings, were very emphatic about um, tip, food combining. What foods combine well together, and what foods are completely antagonistic toward each other. Coffee is a food unless you add dairy milk to it, for example.
Interesting.
Yeah, things like that. So he was very big on recommending that people not combine certain foods together, and especially at certain times of the day or certain seasons, which is very sort of Ayurvedic, really.
It's a big topic, but I hope this gives us a few useful pointers.
Yep.
All right, what's next? What's the third pillar?
Well, this is a combination thing. I put down movement, silence, breath, and connection. What you could also say is meditation, prayer. And I would add to that spiritual hygiene. Well, what the heck does that mean? Um, Let me start with that and then just kind of say all those things are interactive. They're all interactive. When we meditate, we change our brainwave states to more of delta theta instead of alpha beta, right? So going into lower brain, into these lower frequency brainwave states most closely matches us to the Earth's base frequency. Okay. So when you're in delta, you are hovering roughly around 6 to 7 hertz. Your brain waves are cycling that at that. Now, everybody's going crazy the last 6 months, going Schumann resonance is going nuts. It's going up to 40 and 50 hertz at times and spiking up to 100. I have other theories on why that's happening. I don't want to get into sidetrack and get into that here. But that kind of gives people the impression we should be spiking our energy, our brainwave should be spiking that high too. But it puts us into a really, really strong kind of agitated hyper alert state, almost beta, because beta state is 12 to 13 hertz in bioelectric magnetic understanding is in the Schumann resonance. So matching frequencies is great, but if the matching frequency is going so erratic, then you can't feel grounded. You're going to feel stressed. And people have been, it's bringing up emotional stuff. It's bringing up erratic behavior. It's bringing up people going into freak out. Um, and one of the things I would say around this is that meditation predominantly isn't just for stress relief. It's predominantly for connection to the core of consciousness, the core of consciousness. However you want to name that, however you want to think about that, spirit is what I use. Spirit or source consciousness, prime. We are fractal, as David Icke says, we are fractal attention points within the field of infinite consciousness. So you take yourself inside into that state, you not only match resonance with core consciousness, you match resonance with the earth pulse. And that is why delta theta states feel so good and why we come out of them so much more refreshed. being in silence is a difficult thing these days. And silence is so important for brainwave activity and for cognitive balance between the left and right hemispheres of the brain through the corpus callosum. And if you are constantly walking around with earbuds, listening to music, or while you're on the computer or in your car, then you're not giving your eardrums and your inner ear any dang rest, but you're not giving your consciousness any space either. Silence and solitude are kind of in a luxury category these days. You know, we walk into grocery stores and there's music going. We walk into department stores, there's hip hop blaring, clothing stores. There's no space. You go into an airport lounge in the US, there's 5 screens in an airport gate screaming CNN at you, you know? So there's no space, and people don't know what to do with silence. They don't know what to do with solitude, but we need it. We need it as much as we need the touch and connection with other human beings. We need space alone. We need time to be with our own thoughts. So whatever that looks like for you, even if it means shutting yourself into a closet at home, which is not optimal, but I would go out into
Let's
nature,
not do
trying
that.
to find going
Let's
somewhere
find
in
a better
nature.
way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
find somewhere in nature where there aren't a lot of people, and you're not going to have people coming up and talking to you. In the middle of a pine forest is one of the quietest and sweetest places I've ever found. You know, there's just that low hanging evergreen branches, and you're sitting on a mat of the needles, and it's so still. And it smells great too, but not everybody has access to that. But reducing the amount of time that you are exposed to noise pollution is really important. So I will emphasize that. The other part is breath. I have a friend of mine who's called the breath guru, as a matter of fact, um, Alan Dolan, and you can find him online, Alan Dolan, or breathguru.com, I think. But he is a great advocate of how more oxygen intake is not only great for our brains and our physiology, our central nervous system, it actually does help us connect to the prana of everything in the planet, the prana, the atmosphere. This very fragile 55-mile band of atmosphere. Uh, you know, none of the oxygen that we breathe or can be produced without plant life. It's like trees are like the superconductor of the planet, and we are the beneficiaries, and we are living in symbiosis with them. We breathe out carbon dioxide, they breathe out as a waste product oxygen. So the breath is core as bioelectromagnetic harmony. So breath work works with that bioelectric field without you even realizing it. So any kind of conscious breath work that you can experiment with, I don't recommend anybody try cobra breath. You know, you'll pass out. That's a yogic technique and a tantric technique and a Taoist technique, as a matter of fact. So you start with just slow, deep rhythmic breathing, and breathing deeper and deeper into the diaphragm, into the lower abdomen, because that's the muscle. The diaphragm is what does your breathing for you automatically or autonomically. We are the only mammalian creatures that have, I mean, not the only, but we as mammalian creatures breathe autonomically. Dolphins, who are also mammals, and the big whales are also mammals, they have to breathe deliberately. As a result of their having to breathe to live, they have 98% lung capacity, exhaling and inhaling. We're only registering, when we're autonomic breathing from the chest only, about 33% in oxygen intake and toxic exhale.
Wasn't that
So
interesting?
yeah, so we need to be taking some time, as much as we can, catching ourselves shallow breathing. Now, sometimes when people start deep breathing exercises, and I have a couple to recommend that I give to clients, they have emotional material come up from nowhere. And this is normal. And a lot of the time, you're just releasing trauma and stress you didn't know you were carrying. That's all it is. It's in the cells. It's a detox. It's not something happening in the now to you. It's something that happened prior that is just flushing out of the system. So to me, that's pillar number 3, encapsulated, except for one thing. Spiritual hygiene is the understanding that we live in a multidimensional multiverse. We are not just here on planet Earth. We are interacting with energies and fields and dimensions and that overlap into ours and overlap into our consciousness and into our souls. And so we are not living in an island of space and time. And so I have worked with a lot of people to help them release unconscious attachments from entities or other, souls that didn't know they were dead. My Aunt Mildred can't leave because she doesn't know she doesn't even know she's dead. I mean, those are extreme mediumistic experiences that some people do encounter. It's kind of what the basis of a haunted house is. Um, but it's not ooga booga scary stuff. All right, it's not about, oh no, we don't want to think about those negative things. um, you have to face the understanding that as a human being who's connected to source all times, there's never been any separation except as an intellectual belief. um, you are more aligned with that when you are not in fear, and when you treat these things as pesky interruptions or toxic situations, just as you would toxic electricity. um, you are in charge, but you are not directly in charge. And I have to make this caveat: you are not the one to be like the priest in The Exorcist who's casting out demons, all right, or something like that. You have to understand that love and light and source are the superior power, not you. And that's where most people go wrong with this idea of entity possession or influenced by hyperdimensional hostile consciousnesses or aspects of consciousness that don't mean us well. You don't do battle with them, because if you try to get into a battle mode with any of these things, they just love it. They just love power struggles. And you will be going, oh my God, because hate just bonds as strongly as love. And you're going to be in for a rough ride. And so I don't recommend anybody think, oh, I could do this, I'm a divine master, come to co-create heaven and earth. It's like, are you ready? Strap in, because you're not going to get out of that situation without a few wounds. So I have some tools for that kind of stuff, and for keeping your fields clear of other people that are in bodies, for example, that maybe you have a relationship you haven't resolved, and there's somebody you don't like, or you have a difficult time with a particular relative. There are processes in which you can disengage from the karmic level of interaction with those people, and you do a lot of this work too. So I'm preaching to the choir.
Yes, and I'm aware that this can sound a bit arcane.
I know.
And I guess, if I were to give some advice to the average viewer, if there is such a person.
In normal times.
Yeah, like normal, I don't know what that is, but anyhow, hypothetically speaking, like some universal advice that I think works is come to center to the best of your ability.
Yeah.
Breathe into your heart, quiet the mind, breathe some more, and some more. And I think it's about really coming to the core of who we are, which is a peaceful, loving feeling ultimately. So as maybe we start to meditate or do a little bit of
Mhm.
breathing, whatever emotion is there can come through. And ultimately, what I think one finds is just a peaceful feeling, ultimately.
That's the balance point. Yeah.
Yeah, and that would be you really being in harmony with yourself and at the same time in harmony with that greater spirit source that you're talking about. So that's the place of power, really. It's not a,
Yeah.
we'll fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
The place of
It's
power is
not
a
a
very
Bruce Lee
peaceful one.
movie, okay? It's not a Bruce Lee movie.
Yeah, and it's a quiet joy, it's a quiet peace, and it's just a gentle feeling of relief and a basic trust that everything's okay, really.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I think it's good to remember it doesn't have to be super complicated. Um,
No,
what I find helps actually, I know the silence is perhaps a little bit of a luxury and can be a little bit tricky to get into that. But I like to use brainwave technology when I listen to meditation music that has harmonizing alpha brainwave technology. It really does help to bring us into a more meditative state quite easily with the brain entrainment. I do like those, I have to admit.
I completely concur, because I'm a musician, and so I'll listen if I can't get into a state quickly enough, I'll listen to something like that, because it's a heck of a good tool. It's a really great.
It's really, really great. There are lots of free apps now. It's a very widespread technology. Um, have a listen, try different tracks out, and if you find one that works for you, go for it. You know, there are some
Exactly.
meditations I absolutely adore. I just use them all the time, and they also serve as a little anchor. So I know if I'm putting that music on, I'm going into a meditative state, and boom,
Yep.
it's really easy. It's really quick. And for breathwork, there are so many techniques. But again, I like the Wim Hof breathing, just a simple round. There's YouTube videos and there's a free app as
I've
well.
got his video. I just haven't watched it yet, but yeah, I'm very
Yeah,
intrigued by that.
it works amazingly. So depending on where you find yourself, there is a slower version of one round of breathwork. It's about 11 minutes, 12 minutes, something like that, and then a faster one so you can go with your with where you're at. I find it works wonders, and it gets me into this beautiful inner state. And sometimes if there's emotions, they will come out, but it's good. It's a detoxification, isn't it?
Yeah, lightening the load.
Yeah, exactly. It's very time efficient as well. I think it's an important consideration because let's face it, most of us don't have like hours to spend,
Yeah,
trying to still the mind. There's too much to do. There's
way
life
too
to
many
live.
things.
But these little techniques can help us get into a pretty harmonized state in 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 15 minutes. It's really okay. Even
Yeah,
that little bit helps
you can,
enormously.
if you can do, take a breather, 2 or 3 times a day. You'll feel the benefits after a week or so of that. No problem. Well, you'll
Yeah,
feel it immediately, but then a cumulative effect. So, do
absolutely.
we have time to cover the fourth pillar?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Imagination and creative expression. To me, imagination is the thing that connects us to that source. The power of imagination. In the Gnostic texts, they call it epinoia, and it is the creative spark. And the creative spark is the quality or attribute most closely aligned to source consciousness. And so that's what makes us both amazing as creative beings, as an evolutionary experiment of the divine, but it also makes us vulnerable to making incredible bad imaginative mistakes, such as, well, you name it. Any kind of technology went wrong, or any kind of medical procedure went wrong. I mean, we learn through our mistakes. That's the main thing. But if we imagine something beautiful, i.e., angelic outreach used to say, live heaven. That's a nice thing to think about. Live heaven, your vision of heaven on earth. Follow your spirit without hesitation. Um, Great little phrases. And so imagination gives you free reign to be able to bring into the space something more exalted than what you're currently feeling or experiencing. And then from there, the creative impulse says, okay, well, how do I go about making this so? How do I make this experience real in this context or real in that context? It's usually pretty simple. Somebody imagines a chair. Okay, well, it's nice. It's there. It's an existent idea or ideal at that level. But when they actually sketch the chair out as a plan to build it, that's when the manifestation starts. So creativity is a two-step process. Imagination is the first part. Creativity is actually the sort of executable part to me. So I can imagine all kinds of amazing music, but unless I sit down at this keyboard behind me, nothing's going to happen, or the guitar. Um, it's all dependent on, there's the being and then there's the doing. All right. So I'm being imaginative and then I'm doing that imaginative to bring it into form and bring it into substance. And this is actually what we are designed to do from the get-go. We're sort of fractals of that huge imagination that brought all this into being. And if we are not doing that, we don't feel like we have, I guess, a purpose or an evolutionary intent that actually has a mode of expressing, pushing out. So the divine expression is saying, okay, here's the concept. What do we do with it? In the Australian Aboriginal ideology or philosophy of the dream time is all there is. We are being dreamed. The galaxy is being dreamed into existence. Everything that is occurring is part of the dream. And we're actually more awake when we're dreaming than we are when we're awake. Because, when we're dreaming, our five senses may be shut down on the physical level, but we still can see. We can still taste things. We can still feel the wind on our face. We can still feel someone's touch. All these things are happening in sort of a more real reality than they are here. It's bringing them, that vibration that is running very high and slowing it down through sketching the chair or writing the piece of music or putting the words on paper that makes that process become circular and complete. So in a time like we're in right now, where everybody is sort of in this imposed or voluntary isolation, creativity becomes ever more an outlet for frustration, loneliness, boredom, anger, longing, yearning. All those kind of things can be channeled in creative ways. Some people are baking lots of cakes and then giving them to their neighbors. Some people are creating pies. Some people are creating recipes, experimenting with food prep. Some people are painting. Some people are dancing. Some people are reinventing their business online. Whatever the case may be. It's important to not succumb to despair or uselessness or a sense of non-existence. I think that's the main thing, is that we all need to be touched in some way. We all need to be recognized for being here in some way. The biggest addiction that most people have is feeling a lack of being seen, a lack of not being heard. And so for me, I can see that that's been one of the core gifts or teachings that I've had in my lifetime, even before I ever became so-called spiritual teacher, which I don't like to even call myself, spiritual mentor perhaps, or a guide, is the ability I've had in my life, and also, for my own benefit, but also the benefit of others, is to help them find their voice again, or just so by being seen and being listened to. So we need that. And this is what is the toughest parts about this time, is that we don't have that ability to reach out. Oh, give me a hug, or can I give you a hug? Or, I need somebody to hold me so I can cry. There's none of that typical tribal mammalian expression at this moment. And it's tough. So the imagination is, imagine yourself experiencing that. Imagine what it feels like. Write about it, write poetry, sing, sing your grief and sing your joy. Don't make any emotion wrong at all. And certainly don't try to shift an emotion once you're in it, but sit down, take the time out to actually be with that feeling, write it on a piece of paper, sing it, dance it, whatever it is. So that's my fourth prescription.
Fantastic. Yes, it's so tied to expressing oneself, isn't it? And really manifesting in some form one's inner being, which is really beautiful.
Yeah.
Um, I do have a special session planned on this, so viewers,
Okay.
please tune in again for that. All about creativity. Um, but yes, what else have we not covered, Isaac, that you'd like to add at this point? I mean, you've already given us quite a lot. So I'm wondering if this
Well,
cherry on the
I
icing.
probably give some reference material for people. One of the books that I'm going through right now, which is kind of a work of love and research by a gentleman who was a graduate from Cornell University, Phi Beta Kappa in mathematics. He's a scientist, and he's an investigator, and he actually attended medical school at University of California, Berkeley, until he had to leave because of an X-ray accident. that he experienced, which affected his health in such a way that he couldn't continue his medical studies. But this book is a revelation, and there's a book that preceded it back in the 1970s. So I'm recommending this to your watchers, to people watching. The first one is, I've got to get back to this. I'm going to screen share this. Is that all right?
Go ahead.
Okay. There it is. The Invisible Rainbow, A History of Electricity and Life by Arthur Firstenberg. Now, what's interesting about this book is it just was published on February 20th and wasn't available for purchase until April 9th. But it's obviously been in the works probably for close to a decade. So it's interesting its timing of its release. And my information around the myelin sheaths that surround the central nervous system cells and the brain cells, which are superconductive DC current pathways, is from research in this book. And a lot more. The understanding of life and consciousness as being basically electric. So the thing that preceded this book, who author and book he mentions, is Dr. Robert O. Becker, who wrote a book called The Body Electric. Dr. Robert O. Becker is a osteopathic physician and naturopath who wrote that groundbreaking work back in the late 60s. Wilhelm Reich, I will say over and over again, The Function of the Orgasm is a fascinating study by a Freud contemporary, a Jung contemporary, who studied the effects, without even realizing it, the effects of people holding energy or holding on to orgasmic energy, or putting themselves into states of ill health because of blockages of that flow of energy within themselves, which is basically electrical. So there is lots out there to avail yourself of to understand yourself better, but also understand better the function of nature and cosmos and what's going on in this grand journey we're all in.
Thank you. We'll add some sources in the notes for this video.
Cool.
And do you have a final message for us?
This is all going to morph. What's going on right now is going to morph into something else. And so with this talk or this interview with you, I'm basically saying self-care mastery really begins with you. Don't try to put oxygen masks on everybody else first. Get yourself in a place where you are in a place of centeredness, groundedness, stillness, and health, and then help other people with their oxygen masks, okay? The more that one person can bring joy and bliss and peace and stability into their lives, it does have an effect on the collective. And it resonates throughout the universe, whether you realize it or not.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more.
Okay.
So thank you so much, Isaac. It's been very insightful, and I think we're all inspired to go do some research and
Yeah.
get
And practice.
ourselves,
Try
yeah,
these things out. Experimentation. That's what we're here. You're partially here to do. Experiment and find out what works for you. Because everything I've said today, some of it may work for you, and not all of it. I don't. That's why it is called self-care mastery. It's your mastery. That's what you have to find. What is your perfect balance point?
fantastic. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.
I'm looking forward to it already. Thank you so much for having me on.
Pleasure. Thank you.